One of the most important African American leaders of the late 19th and early 20th centuries was Booker T. Washington. He was born into slavery on April 5, 1856, in Franklin County, Virginia. His mother, Jane, worked in the kitchen and cooked for Jane Burroughs. At age 9, he performed tough tasks. Being a slave was not only tough for him, but it was a barrier that was blocking his dreams. One of his dreams was attending school. Outside the plantation in which he worked, he could see a little school. He would see children with books walking near the school. He wanted to be like them, but he felt it was impossible. In 1866, Booker T. Washington worked for Viola Ruffner, the wife of a coal miner. She saw something special in Booker T. She saw intelligence and maturity. She allowed him to go to school for an hour every day in the winter. Due to his desire in studying, in 1872, he walked all the way to Hampton Norman Agricultural Institute in Virginia. When he got there, he convinced the administrators to allow him to attend school. At the institution, he had to work as a janitor to pay for his expenses and his tuition. He was later given a scholarship offered by General Samuel Armstrong, who later became Booker T. Washington's mentor. Years passed and he finally graduated from Hampton in 1875. He won trust of white philanthropists from the South and the North to make Tuskegee into a school of industrial education. Booker T. Washington assured whites that nothing taught at the Tuskegee Institute would challenge white supremacy. He believed African Americans should work hard and show progress in order to prove whites they were equal to them. He believed that Southern racism was way too strong and firm, that demanding social equality would not work. He thought industrial education would enable them to lift themselves up. He even encouraged African Americans to stop demanding voting rights and ending segregation. In September 1895, Washington was invited to speak at the 1895 Cotton States and International Exposition in Atlanta. There, he gave out a speech. The speech was called the Atlanta Compromise. In the speech, he accepts that reality of African Americans and segregation. He stated that they should focus on vocational education. In his speech, he says something that became very famous. He says, "The wisest of my race understand that the agitation of social equality is the extremist folly, and that progress in the enjoyment of all privileges that will come to us must be the result of severe and constant struggle rather than the artificial forcing." Through this quote, we can see that Booker T. Washington actually believed that African Americans should suffer in order to demand equality. In his speech, Booker T. Washington also said that African Americans should compromise or adequate to racial segregation. This gave him the name of the accommodator. Although he never criticized forced segregation or the Jim Crow laws, he contributed money to the legal fights against them in secret. One of his contributions to the civil rights movement included his call for blacks to acquire economic independence. Washington thought that the way out to the problem of racial segregation was due to the economy. In 1900, Washington founded the National Negro Business League, whose goal was to promote the commercial and financial development of the Negro. Because he was an accommodist, it seemed like he had a peacemaking approach to civil rights, which made him a lot of fundraising for his Tuskegee Institute and other black organizations. He controlled the flow of funds to black schools and colleges. Not only was he the most influential black African American figure at that time, but he also consulted Roosevelt and William Taft when they needed. Booker T. Washington was such a controversial figure because many African Americans saw him as a traitor. One of the most famous African American leaders, W.E. Du Bois, had a dispute with him. He did not like that he was an accommodist. African American and white opposition to Booker T. Washington's ideas in disfranchisement and Jim Crow led to Niagara Movement formation and to the NAACP formation. This controversial figure died in November 14, 1915, due to high blood pressure. He is buried on campus at the Tuskegee Institute.